Thank you, Crystal, for having me again, for inviting me back. Very honored to be doing a presentation for your group. My name is Jeff Selver, and today my presentation is how Vedic philosophy can help us understand the phenomenon. I am the author of The Rising and the Alien Plan to Build an Enlightened City on Earth, where I relay my story of alien contact, which is available at my website, www.jeffselver.com. My email, in case anybody desires to reach out to me, is jeffselver@gmail.com. And interestingly, in my book, I relay a story of how, technically without my knowing, the entities who I was in touch with at that time without my knowing, led me to a Vedic Sadguru, who I would then study Vedic philosophy and meditation with for over 23 years. He is private, so I don't reveal his identity, but I do share what I have learned from him. So, Dr. Jessica Utz, professor of statistics at the University of California, Irvine, analyzed the statistical results of the controlled experiments of 10 laboratories conducting classified remote viewing research at the Stanford Research Institute. Remote viewing is the viewing of objects, vehicles, buildings, and even photographs from a distance with mental visualization. There was enough validity with the program that the CIA used it for over 20 years, until the end of the Cold War, and Jimmy Carter spoke of its success in finding a downed Soviet aircraft in Africa in 1978. Essentially, what Utz found was statistically the success rate was low, 1 in 3. Yet those who were successful displayed a level of accuracy that was significant, beyond chance, and could not be explained as lucky guesses, proving remote viewing's validity. She concluded from her statistical analysis that there was a 1 in 10 billion chance participants could have successfully guessed the level of detail remotely viewed so consistently. Other skeptics analyzing the data, such as Ray Hyman, agreed with her analysis that there was overwhelming statistical evidence in favor of the human ability to remote view. Here she is in an interview on Beach TV, March 26, 2018.
Now, one of the most interesting aspects of remote viewing is the fact that you can do this over a long distance.
Right.
In other words, it's just as easy to remote view something in China or Australia as it is in your neighbor's garage down the street.
Yeah.
I mean, the garage door is closed, you don't know what's in there,
Right.
but the ability of remote viewing is such that I can do it in China or Australia just as easily as looking in his garage.
That's right.
And so that means that there's this distance component that is quite amazing, and also the precognition that you talked about, being able to predict events. We used to call that premonition, I believe.
Right.
And so you have premonitions, and you can predict events that aren't going to occur for 2-3 days, maybe a
Right.
week later.
Yep.
And so that would seem to suggest that there's some sort of hyperdimensional aspect to remote viewing, where time is not just a fourth dimension, but maybe there are additional dimensions. We call that, I guess, non-local correlation or non-locality, having that distance ability and that ability to see over time. What does that imply, non-locality?
I think it implies that we need to get the physicists working on this. I think there really is something we don't understand about physics, and that somehow people are able to go through space and time in the way that we understand it to gain information. I think we have great clues that you can do it over long distances and do it across time. Those are great clues that something is wrong, or not, something is incomplete about our understanding of the universe if we think of it as just 3 dimensions plus time.
Now, Jessica, before we went to the break, I said we'd talk about some other examples of remote viewing, which are pretty astounding. And one of them is the fact that they did tests where they took the remote viewers out into submarines and went 500 miles off the coast and went 500 feet below water in the submarine, and they still had the same kinds of results from the remote viewers.
Right.
So when that kind of phenomenon occurs, how do the skeptics manage to explain that away?
They don't. That's what's interesting. They selectively choose evidence, and I wouldn't call them skeptics. A true skeptic would really be trying to figure this out. I'd call them deniers or debunkers. They selectively pick evidence that is easy to pick apart, like some examples where somebody in the room knew the right answer. That you can pick that apart because it's too easy to give subtle clues if someone in the room knows the right answer. But having the submarine down there and You can't explain that away. And by the way, one of the reasons they did that was they were trying to rule out like electromagnetic waves as the explanation. So they used various ways to block those kinds of waves. That's why I always laugh when I hear people say, well, if it was real, we should be able to detect waves or something coming out of people's heads. No, we know it doesn't work that way.
Right, and related to what we talked about before the break, if this is some quantum dynamic that involves multiple dimensions, then the electromagnetic field is not what this is about to begin with.
Yep.
And shielding, obviously 500 feet below water and in a submarine is pretty good shielding.
That's right.
But they've also found that other kinds of shielding, using the Faraday cage or something like that, still that doesn't make any difference either.
Exactly, yep.
So, point 1, a field that allows remote viewing through space and time that has no distance or barriers. So I just finished a series of presentations on my YouTube channel called Exploring the Phenomenon's Connection to the Afterlife. I focused in part on the research of Dr. Bruce Grayson from his book After, in which he studied hundreds of first-hand case studies of near-death experiences, those who passed on and had come back. More than half of those who had NDEs said that after death, we review our lives and judge ourselves, and in some form have to face the consequences of the things we did. This is what we call the life review. And more than half of those who experienced the life review experienced the past events not only through their own eyes, but also from the viewpoints of others, feelings those others people's emotions as well as their own. Senses incorporate a full unity experience with details about all participants' lives and perspectives. I received all information about every scene, my perceptions and feelings, and everybody else's perceptions and feelings who were in the scene. There was no good and no bad. There was only me and my loved ones from this life trying to be or just trying to survive. So point 2, near-death experiencers experience a heightened state of unity in the life review. So on July 5th, 2023, someone posted a very peculiar post on Reddit. The gist is, someone posted an incredible detailed amount of scientific biological knowledge about a gray alien body that they had studied. Reddit has their share of knowledgeable scientists, and many people couldn't debunk the level of biological detail knowledge. It got more than 20,000 upvotes and was even mentioned by Joe Rogan. So this is the post. From the late 2000s to the mid-2010s, I worked as a molecular biologist for a national security contractor in a program to study exobiospheric organisms. I will share with you a lot of information on this subject. Feel free to ask questions and ask for clarification. So the point is it actually had a lot of collaboration with my own contact events, with my firsthand experience with gray aliens. I found it to be very legit, and it was actually also corroborated by John Ramirez. The post describes that the gray aliens have DNA that's compatible with humans. John Ramirez has mentioned this as well too. For those who don't know John Ramirez, he's come out with Lou Elizondo as part of this kind of whistleblower package. Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, and now John Ramirez as part of the CIA, and he's corroborating evidence or information from this post. So the whole picture seems to be very, very interesting. And here's Joe Rogan talking about it as well too. I think there are rabbits in these holes. And the point is, I analyzed this whole whistleblower post and put a video on it on my channel where I compare it against my own personal experience with gray aliens, and a lot of it matched. But what's interesting is this very, very specific line about the behavior or the entity's nature. The author of the document added his reflections and interpretations as part of an appendix. He specified that for them, the soul field is not a belief, but an obvious truth. He also argues that the soul loses its individuality after death, but that memory and experience persists as part of the field. This belief compels them to seed life, shape it, nurture it, monitor it, and influence it for the ultimate purpose of creating this apotheosis. By the way, apotheosis is God realization. Therefore, it needs to be emphasized, according to this seemingly accurate whistleblower, for the entities, the soul field is not a belief, but an obvious truth. So the whole point that I'm making, a field that allows remote viewing through space and time that has no distance or barriers, that near-death experiencers experience in the life review as a heightened state of shared experience, is the field of universal consciousness that ancients have talked about and the quantum physicists are discovering, that you are connected to and can experience right now. The unified soul field is real. It is alive, and it is the source of your own consciousness, of your own awareness. Now, I also experienced this with the aliens directly. In my first contact event, I experienced a unified field on craft. And I've been very public about that. That story is on my YouTube channel. It's in my book. And they turned me into an orb, and I experienced the unified field in their crafts. And they appear to have soul tech that does seem to utilize this soul field, and then they can communicate, information through soul technology. Very fascinating. And also, I was an experiment. That's what my whole story is. I talked about that last time. An experiment to discover my soul and unity, having very condensed experiences of unity during the process. And the unity, what I mean is, I saw myself, my own impression of me in the mountains, in the landscapes, in the trees. I was in the environment, and I could feel me in all the environment around me in a very heightened state. So this unified soul field is very, very real and is very much a part of our existence. And this is what the Vedas were all about. So that was my grand entrance for the Vedas, to emphasize that these ancients have been at it for thousands of years, and they have a very powerful and interesting system on how to access and utilize this unified field. So the entire purpose of the Vedas is to self-realize that source is inside you, to experience this unified field. It is not a religion, but a science of spiritual psychology that can be applied to religious or spiritual, any type of religious or spiritual outlook. Though there are hundreds of Vedic scriptures with their dates, though largely contested, they generally originate between 1500 to 500 BC. The Vedas
Okay.
themselves are scriptures. So there's four main Vedas. So they call them the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Samar Veda, and the Atharva Veda. And they're largely historical documents about religious rites, and yeah, largely about religious rites. And then within them are powerful lines, powerful scriptures. So they're quite massive, quite large. And again, there's a lot of them, and then there's a whole bunch of other types of Vedas. So the Vedas is a large scripture set. So that's probably the best way to frame it. And then within that is a scripture called the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata was the life of Krishna. So Krishna being the main deity, the main guru, if you will. And so his life as it's detailed out, and it's kind of slash storytelling, slash some people think it's historical, but regardless, it's inspirational is what it is. And then within the Mahabharata, so it's such a huge epic, kind of like Lord of the Rings style, where there's multiple movies based off of one person's life. The Bhagavad Gita is a section, and the Bhagavad Gita itself is a very condensed and powerful story, and within it are all these lines of wisdom. So it's very condensed in the as far as wisdom goes. Most teachers of the philosophy will espouse that the Bhagavad Gita, a story from the Mahabharata, which details the life of Krishna, is the essence of the Vedas, condensing into a single scripture. So this here is a diagram I found online. That's a very good representation of all the scriptures. There's hundreds of them. Some of them I'm actually familiar with, but I do largely have singled out the Bhagavad Gita, and I will do that today here too. The Bhagavad Gita, when translated to English, is Songs of God, and that's what I draw from today. Today, I'll draw from an edition of the Bhagavad Gita from Sri Ramakrishna Tapovanam Publishing, published in 1997. It is translated by Swami Vivekananda with commentary by Ramakrishna, who followed the Advaita Vedanta tradition espoused by the 8th century sage Adi Shankara, who espouses non-dualism at its core philosophy. One of the great premises of Vedic philosophy is that the mind alone is the trickster, demanding to hold its frame of reference of reality against the desires of the soul. And this is because it takes its belief from the picture it creates about existence from the five senses. But reality, the truth of what you are, is not made up by the five senses. You originate from a realm beyond space and time, and duality as well too, and that realm is called the Absolute. The Vedas called it the Paramatma, or Grand Soul, and this is what we call the Higher Self. The Bhagavad Gita espouses unity. His mind being harmonized by yoga, he sees himself in all beings and all beings in himself. He sees the same in all. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 29. Separateness is not for him who has progressed high in yoga. And yoga, by the way, when we use the word yoga, it means to yoke, but it's moving towards. It's the process of ignorance moving towards unity. It's the path of going towards unity. So yoga means the path of unity. Separateness is not for him who has progressed high in yoga. The distinction between the high and the low vanishes from his mind. He sees the same divinity in all. In his intuition, the self in him is the self in all, and the self in all is the self in him. The individualized selves do all merge into one universal self. This is his realization. Swami Chidbhavananda. Without and within all beings, the unmoving and also the moving. Because of his subtlety, he is incomprehensible. He is far and near. The Bhagavad Gita is describing the unified field. Chapter 13, verse 15. So I'm seeing research in many different types of fields that support the Vedic perspective. NDE research shows that divinity changes one's attitude towards death. And I just found this very powerful from their research. This is Dr. Bruce Grayson's research. What particular features of near-death experiences are associated with changes in death attitudes? In a sample of more than 400 people who had NDEs, meeting some kind of divine or godlike being was associated with increased acceptance of death and decreased fear of death and decreased death anxiety. Meeting deceased loved ones, seeing a brilliant light, and feelings of joy in the NDE were also associated with acceptance of death. And a feeling of being one with the universe was also associated with decreased death anxiety. But to my surprise, a sense of leaving the body was not significantly associated with death attitudes. I had expected that an experience of being free from the body would reduce people's fear of death, and other researchers had guessed this also. But that did not seem to be the case. So this shows the importance of finding your godhood, of finding divinity, whatever that might mean for you. But some version of that divine connection, of that unity connection, is required in the acceptance of death. And that's a very powerful point of research that came out. And then the other is Dr. Andrew Newberg and Mark Walden studied the brains of those who experienced God from all types of religions, including atheists. And they found that the brain is designed to generate and perceive spiritual realities, that God is part of our consciousness, and that the more you think about God, the more the brain becomes aware of subtle experiences of reality. So believing in God is beneficial for the neurology of your brain. This is, of course, as long as you are not believing in a God that is vindictive, punitive, or supports an us versus them mentality, which is all damaging to the brain. So our left brain, which embodies the logical desire for definition, struggles with a unity perspective, which is a flow state indicative of the right brain. Yet it is within unity that we can find our own higher self. It is in unity that lives the paradox that source, the God, is outside of us while simultaneously being inside of us. But how do we awaken to the power of the divine when we don't experience it within us? This is the grand paradox of the human experience of projection. This is why the gurus and masters of the Vedas understood the role of worshiping the divine figure to experience Godhead within. The water in the pipe can rise to the level in the reservoir to which it is connected. Likewise, the mind of man rises to the level, the mind of the person rises to the level of the deity whom he adores. Swami Chidbhavananda. So this line is so significant, and it's part of I think it's part of the present Western struggle with all these concepts. So the simplest idea or the simplest explanation I can make of this. So, I tell you that the source, the universe, God is unconditional loving. And then I tell you that you're God, but you don't experience unconditional loving. You've never experienced that. You never experienced yourself unconditionally loving yourself. So you have a limitation on the experience, and you don't understand what it means. And you just be left with a question. If you say that I'm unconditional loving to myself and you don't experience it, then you aren't really experiencing yourself to be, the universe. You're not experiencing yourself to be God. But when you project out that an entity outside of you can experience unconditional, that is experiencing or experiences unconditional love for yourself, then you actually begin to embody, then you internalize the experience of unconditional love by it being something grander than yourself, and you eventually learn how to experience it within yourself. It becomes a strange paradox on the role of projection, and that goes with every aspect of what might be called the source. So unlimited potential, eternity, all these ideas that are too grand for the individual human, you place them onto an object or some level of something, some image for yourself outside of you, and then slowly begin to internalize that by recognizing it's outside of you, but you can access, you can touch that. And it's a weird game on that projection does, and that's what Swami Chidbhavananda is referring to here. The mind of the individual rises to the level of the deity whom he adores. And he had an extra line here that I just thought was very consistent with people's experiences with aliens, with the phenomenon. So he says the sadhaka, who would be the student, should therefore be able to distinguish between the minor deities at various cosmic levels and Ishwara being God, the ultimate reality. So that's a very interesting part, that if you're dealing with aliens, you actually want to know your unified field, because the aliens being powerful in and of themselves, we're not supposed to worship them. And I think that's part of the problem with disclosure. We're not supposed to worship these entities, though they can guide us, and that's one of the most powerful positions to be in, but they are not God. And the whole contact events I had, they never said they were God. They just were part of the process for me to find God inside myself. And it's a very interesting role that gets played here for someone having to discover this within inside themselves. And he actually adds here, the devas are more evolved than men. Their span of embodied life being great, they are called the immortals, but they are also subject to the birth and death. By worshiping them, humankind may gain longevity and supernatural powers, which are all hindrances to bhakti, jnana, and mukti. I'll go into these in a couple seconds here, but the bottom line being is that this is real. I actually believe that this was a good intuition on the impact that high level entities like aliens can have on humans who don't have the source inside themselves, or don't know how to connect with that. And then you can end up worshiping entities, and that's, I don't believe, is the purpose of them being in our lives. The ignorant one believes that God is in some far off region called heaven. The enlightened one, on the other hand, beholds him as the core of his own being. Ishwara is in the hearts of all. The seeker of God therefore realizes him first within himself. Sri Ramakrishna. He who realizes Ishwara is in his heart is able to realize him outside too. He who has not known him within himself cannot recognize him elsewhere. Therefore, he who sees God in his heart sees him everywhere. So it's a very powerful game of projection. Something outside, I feel it on the inside. When I feel it on the inside, then I can understand it's all things around me. It's a very interesting game that we have to go through of projection to find God within, that the Vedas understood. And that's in part recognized by Krishna was the higher self, right? Krishna spoke of himself as being in the hearts of other people. He is a guru, which is exactly how a guru talks. Having a guru, this is exactly how a guru talks. Jesus talked this way, very similar too, right? And so Krishna, as the higher self, says, I am the self, O Guru Kesha, and he's speaking to Arjuna, referring to him as conqueror of sleep. I am the self, O Gudikesha, seated in the hearts of all beings. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. The Lord resides in the heart, the human heart, as witness to all that takes place in the body and the mind. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verse 22. He who undiluted knows me as the highest self. He knows all Bharata, and he worships me with all his heart. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 19. Krishna was the higher self. Krishna was the image projected of God. So they experienced God with Krishna, a unity, someone who's self-realized, and then you end up embodying that unity within you, and then you end up experiencing it around you. Whatever be your concept of God, be it with form or formless, hold fast to it and ardently worship him. But be not conceited that your concept alone of him is the final. In the course of your sadhana, which is your progress towards your devotion, you will come to know by his grace that his attributes and forms are inexhaustible. Sri Ramakrishna. So when you come to the higher self, God, your Godhead figure, you come to the absolute. of time and space. But it is the completed self above duality, space and time. This is what the realm is, a completed self beyond duality. And duality, by the way, is it's, we can only know happiness by knowing sadness. So you only value happiness by knowing the value, by having experienced sadness. You might desire peace in your life, but you only know peace because chaos is in your life. So you actually require the opposite thing to know the value of the aspect with which you're desiring to achieve. So you actually have to have both things to exist in this world. And the world you originate from is beyond that. So that's called duality. And so you actually originate outside of a realm where effects and experiences you're not impacted by them because they already exist because there's no space and time. And it is a region that the quantum reality calls non-locality. It's a challenging place for the mind to comprehend. The manifest state and the unmanifest state of the universe and its beings come within relative existence. But there is an absolute existence which is eternal and ever unmanifest. It never becomes the object of perception. It is ever the thing itself. Swami Chidbhavananda. When the seer perceives no agent other than the gunas, and the gunas are the three gunas, that's past, present, and future, so it's time. You can say when the seer perceives no other agent than time, and knows him who is higher than time, he enters into my being. Right? So finding a way to have your image, whatever that image is, it's Jesus or Krishna, it's Buddha, it's a guru, whatever it is, that individual is beyond space and time. So they're originating from outside of time. And when you can experience that inside your heart, you're going to feel the God entity, the God part, the God field that you're a part of. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 14, verse 19. So qualities of unity manifested into the self. So what happens? Like this is very wild, right? We're talking about all these high concepts, all these high ideas, and then what does it look like to be manifested inside of ourselves? And the Bhagavad Gita does a powerful job at explaining that. So one is desirelessness. So when the discipled mind rests in the self alone, free from desire for objects, then is one said to be established in yoga. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 18. And really what we mean here by desirelessness is not repression of desire. You can never actually rid yourself of desires. But when you're in unity, think that through. You have a desire, but you're in unity. So you're in unity with the thing that you desire. And do you desire it anymore if you're in unity with it? And part of it is that if you're in unity, then you're understanding the role that you have in that being part of your world. And we talked about visioning last time I was here, and visioning and manifesting your vision. And unity is a big part of that process. So when you're in unity with it, you actually do desire that thing in your life, but you're not creating a want. You're living in the space of knowing that you can manifest it. Then your desire for it is it a desire? If you already believe you got it because you're able to vision that in the timelessness state that is consciousness. And that's the real power of desirelessness, is that desirelessness is not the repression of desire, it's the fulfilled desire. That's the real state that unity is in. Balance of mind. He who is the same to foe and friend, and also in honor and dishonor, who is the same in cold and heat, in pleasure and pain, who is free from attachment, to whom censure and praise are equal, who is silent, content with anything, steady-minded, that man is dear to me. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, verse 18 and 19. So we want to become aware of our mind's tendencies to create stories when it doesn't have full information. And this is our mind's tendency to judge, to create expectations and assumptions. And with unity, you're living in a place where at the core of everyone, you have a self that simply and only wants to love and be loved. That's the state of unity, that people who aren't in unity, they're seeking it out. They're constantly in a state of seeking out that unity and projection out in the world, trying to grasp for it when they can't grab it inside themselves. And this creates the mind's dramas. This is the root of mindfulness. The Buddha, Siddhartha himself, was a prince and would have been trained in Vedic philosophy. The premise is the same for for the mind. From the turbulence of our world, we're trying to manage that mind. And that's exactly what this is. The Bhagavad Gita is constantly espousing balance of mind. And that includes principles of acceptance, compassion, and forgiveness. He who hates no being, he who hates no being, who is friendly and compassionate to all, who is free from the feeling of I and mine, even-minded in pain and pleasure and forbearing, ever content, steady in meditation, self-controlled and possessed of firm conviction, with mind and intellect fixed on me, he, my devotee, is dear to me. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, verses 13 and 14. With unity, you seek to understand others' actions, knowing they are just like you, but maybe you have grown up in different types of scenarios or circumstances. Life is a game. Sri Krishna sets an example in regard to the attitude one should assume towards one's earthly career. He viewed this world as a huge playground. Life here is a delightful game. One ought to be a willing and gay participant in this play. Sri Krishna's boyish and innocent indulgences are indications of this attitude. One is expected to enter into life in the spirit in which a sportsman enters into his game. To such a person, this earth is a mansion of mirth. But to him who plays his part with reluctance or disgust, this earthly career is a painful burden. Swami Chidbhavananda. Life is a game when you're in unity. Reliance on the higher power, envisioning as a part of our tools to play it all out. It's meant to be a joy, is the bottom line. And Leela, there's a term in Sanskrit called Leela, and that means life is a play. Life is a stage, and it could be said our realm or planet is a stage for the birth and death life cycle. Creation, preservation, and destruction. Creation, preservation, and destruction are the three phases of ceaseless activity going on in nature. These may be termed the triple purposes of the cosmos. What is sunrise to one place is sunset to another. It is simultaneously the setting sun as well as the rising sun. Birth into the new body is putting an end to the old worn-out body. Seed dies in order to give birth to a seedling. Beings perish in their old bodies prior to the reincarnation in their new ones. The interval between a creation and a destruction is called preservation. Even as the sides of a triangle are interdependent, these triple activities are interrelated. If of these destruction or death is truly understood, the other two become self-evident. Swami Chidbhavananda. And the reason I love this line, or the reason it's very powerful that the Vedas emphasize this, and it's through their gods, right? Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. Right? The universe actually has these three states into it. Duality contains these three states. The absolute is above these states, is the most powerful part of this. And so what that means is that all of life contains creation, preservation, and destruction. And it really is the idea that there's no evil, right? There's no there's movement is what's going on. There's flow in life and existence. And a lot of people want to hanker down that there might be things that are evil, and evil and good are actually concepts of the mind. And the reality is that there's creation, preservation, and destruction. There's movement between these things, and people might be someone who might term as evil might be in a state of themselves as destruction, but we can't understand that or judge that. And so they actually live in it's a wild place that the Vedas come from. The Bhagavad Gita itself takes place on a battlefield between Arjuna the general and Krishna, who is advising the general, and he advises him to fulfill his dharma, to fulfill his duty, to fulfill the war, because Arjuna doesn't want to do the war anymore. It's a very powerful symbol of what it means, being that creation, preservation, and destruction are part of nature. The wolf will attack the baby deer. The shark will eat the human. A meteor will smack into a planet. And so destruction is a part of our lives. And so it's learning to be above that, in the realm above, and coming to our existence from the absolute, from outside time and space. This total lack of cosmic judgment and or divine system of punishment reward has been and continues to be one of the most controversial aspects of the NDE among religious groups. So I pointed this out. I forgot I had this slide, so I apologize. But in the NDE research, they also were fascinated by when people pass on, there's no judgment. right? There's this divine system that doesn't have reward and punishment, not the same way that we would expect it to. And it turned out that love seemed to be the main issue. Were you loving in the life that you existed in? And the challenge ended up becoming, what does this mean for the nature of the universe? And what it means is that the universe is more benevolent than we realize. It has a natural inclination for growth and development, even within creation, preservation, and destruction. And so the Vedas, they tackle all these questions, and it's very powerful. So the four yogas are the four paths towards unity that everyone takes in some way, shape, or form. Doesn't matter what your religion is or what your spirituality is, in some way you embody the four yogas. So there's karma yoga, raja yoga, bhakti yoga, and jnana yoga. All these four yogas are given equal status and importance in the Bhagavad Gita. Any one of these four great paths is sufficient to lead the sadhaka, who is the student, you could say, to perfection. Still, the salutary course is to harmonize all the four paths. Karma yoga provides the person with efficiency. Raja yoga adds to the stamina of the mind. The bhakti yoga unifies beings in sweet relationship, and jnana yoga sharpens the intellect and makes it luminous. All these great qualities and divine elements require to be perfectly blended to evolve an all-absorbing divinity out of humanity. Swami Chidbhavananda. So I'll break those down here because some people don't like. In some cases, some of the religions that we have presently, Christianity, would be considered bhakti yoga. So there's a very powerful, these labels actually can be provided to other religions or even to your own personal spirituality. And you'll end up finding that you become closer to your source by doing so. So karma yoga, I thought this sentence here just summarized it up, or this paragraph here. A yogi seated in a Himalayan cave allows his mind to wander on unwanted things. A cobbler in a corner at the crossing of several busy roads on a city is absorbed in mending a shoe as an act of service. Of these two, the latter is a better yogi than the former. Swami Vivekananda. The premise being is that you're in unity, and when you're in unity, you're acting it out. You're doing the thing with which unity compels you to do. And of course, that's service. You're working with the collective. You're helping other people. You're thinking about others. That's karma yoga. Thinking about others is karma yoga. Jnana yoga. So jnana yoga is yoga of knowledge. It's knowledge and wisdom that leads you towards unity. And that includes contemplation. So reading the Bhagavad Gita would be jnana yoga. Anything that puts you into a state of contemplation and learning about unity and how to embrace that and how to make that a part of your life is jnana yoga. And the idea being is that in spiritual path, you always need knowledge. And so knowledge is a part of the process towards unity. Bhakti yoga. So bhakti yoga is sometimes the most controversial for very silly reasons, actually, but it's the devotion aspect. And most Western, perspectives really denounce this because Western society, as a scientific mind, has been a backlash against the Christian dominance in the Middle Ages, and the Age of Enlightenment was a distinct backlash against Christian thought. And the reality being is that yes, they were very devoted, and so that devotion almost there's like an angst, like oh I want to find my source, but I want nothing to do with worship or divinity or devotion. And there's this like even as I probably say it, I bet you one of you out there has a part like in your mind, like, oh, gross. I don't want to hear about devotion. Oh, I don't want to hear about, worship. And it's because I said this before and gotten into arguments about it with people. Most people think of worship as cowling down, as if I lose my power. And that's not what worship actually is. And it's been perverted actually in the Western mind. And the reality is what it is love. It's just love. It's loving something. And when you love something, you're devoted to it. When you love something, you worship it. And then it's really kind of a challenging space to get the mind into. You have a unity you're trying to get into. You have a symbol, whatever it is, Krishna, Buddha, Guru, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then you're devoted to that thing as an act of a symbol of your unity. And you'll find you'll just get closer to unity and you'll end up embodying it more and more. And this is the role bhakti actually has. Bhakti is a shared love experience. It is missing in our society, and there's too much perversion about worship and what all those things mean. And the reality is, I think every single human is craving bhakti and they don't know it. And it's one of the most powerful things. If people can release themselves to finding a way to feel that unity within as something that they love. So here's a couple beautiful lines here. The glory of God begins to dawn in the mind of the sadhaka, again, the student, who devotedly and persistently practices yoga. This initial experience gives impetus for further pursuit of yoga, leading to greater cognition of God's glory. Swami Chidbhavananda. By devotion, he knows me in truth, what and who I am. Having known me in truth, he forthwith enters into me. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 55. Love makes way to the inaccessible. It opens the door to the impossible. The unknown and the unknowable become known to the true lover. Swami Chidbhavananda. Fix your mind on me. Be devoted to me. Sacrifice unto me. Bow down to me. Having thus made yourself steadfast in me, taking me as the supreme goal, you will come to me. And by no means, Krishna isn't saying, bow down, I'm now controlling you. Krishna is your higher self. So imagine you're saying this, their higher self is saying this to you. That's the idea. And then Raja Yoga. So there's a line from Jesus, of myself I do nothing, the Father that dwells in me, he doeth all the work, is one of the best lines that summarizes Raja Yoga. So it's the embodiment of you being the higher self. It's the practice that takes you there. In Vedic, they have a meditation. I'll talk about that in a second here. Aham Brahmashmi, which means I am the creator. So you are. So there's a unified field. Now you identify with it. And you know when you speak and you act and you talk, you're coming from it. And that's Raja Yoga.